And now a few words about Germany and the history of the Second World War. For us, the Great Patriotic War. We have always proceeded from the fact that the place of the material evidence of the crimes of the Third Reich, which received a deserved assessment in the verdict of the Nuremberg Tribunal, is in museums and memorials. In recent days, I addressed this topic when the whole world, which knows firsthand what the Second World War is, was with dignity remembering the Nuremberg Tribunal and turning again to the documents. We have already spoken about what was happening in Germany against this background. I want to return to this topic once again in more detail. The victims of the Nazis, those who suffered from the Holocaust, the victims of the genocide of the Soviet people, deserve eternal respect and worthy remembrance. What happened in Germany in recent days once again confirms the insincerity of the ostentatious repentance for the horrors of Nazism. A private auction house in the city of Neuss, in the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, put up for auction the personal belongings of Holocaust victims and documents about executions and medical experiments in the Hitlerite torture chambers. That's actually a good question. How is such a thing, in principle, not yet legally prohibited? It was originally planned to put up for sale several hundred documents from the collection of a private researcher of Nazi Germany. According to the online catalog, among the items were an anti-Jewish propaganda poster, documents on forced sterilization, and a yellow star from the Buchenwald concentration camp. I apologize, but I must say this. With signs of wear. A Gestapo card with information about the shooting of a ghetto prisoner in East Prussia in July 1942. For this, for everything, for what was referred to as traces of wear on the Yellow Star of David, for all these materials that were put up for auction, the starting price was set at 350 euros. Amazing. Over 2,000 years, the price of betrayal has not undergone inflation, but deflation. At the same time, the scale of betrayal has remained. A letter from an Auschwitz prisoner to relatives cost 180 euros. I do not know what to call this. Extreme cynicism? I think we've already talked about this. It is something else. This, I don't know, I can't tell you. There should probably be a term, but for now it does not exist. How can all of this be described? How can one, using human terminology, designate the profiteering from selling the intimate thoughts and feelings of people doomed to agonizing suffering? Also put up for auction were documents that belong to criminals. And what's the question? I understand the collectors. They collected this, they brought it from somewhere, they obtained it from somewhere, and so on. Things happen in different ways. These items that have historical value end up in the hands of those who collect them in different ways. The question is something else. Yes, probably the absence of a law played a cruel joke. In the absence of legislative regulation, there was no need to raise this question. But there is conscience. It must exist. Did it really not occur to any of these collectors or to the auction houses that were preparing for the auction? Did it really not occur to any of them that that even if the collectors needed money, maybe they had invested this money, they could turn to museums, memorials, foundations for the protection of the memory of the victims of the Second World War, the victims of the Holocaust. That's right, within the framework of some kind of human communication, or has the so-called ultra-liberal new ethics so clouded people's minds that nothing human remains? If negotiations and confidentiality, what they call tolerance, or in our words, delicacy, are needed for anything in this world at all, if they are needed for anything, it is for the protection of people's feelings, for protection from any kind of harassment. If all this is prohibited by humanity for any reason at all, it is probably for this. Of course, not only for this, but in this particular case, this is the very example where all the aforementioned phenomena and concepts should have come into play. After all, one letter to the Russian side, to any of our museums connected with the history of the Great Patriotic War and the Second World War, one letter, one phone call, one email, one message would have been enough for our citizens, search teams, historians, museum workers, public figures, descendants of the heroes and victims of those years to react instantly and constructively. They would have done everything so that this evidence of the crimes of the Nazis and the feat of their victims and liberators would receive a worthy place in museums and memorial complexes. How many times our country has already demonstrated and proven this at all levels? From creating new exhibitions and preserving previous ones created earlier, to the daily work of search teams and those who engage in this work independently in archives and libraries. How many times it has already been proven that we, as an entire country, honor memory and create it. But no, they took it straight to auction. First, they robbed, destroyed, processed, and after 80 years, they wanted to profit for a second time from the evidence of their own crimes. They turned a human tragedy into a commodity for the second time. There is another point besides the ethical, moral aspect, a pragmatic one. What if all this were acquired by someone who would want to destroy the evidence of the crimes of Nazism and fascism? What if it were acquired by someone who would want to mock the memory of the victims even more? Did this occur to no one? When this incident became public knowledge, official Berlin hurriedly rushed to feign indignation and launch frantic activity to minimize the damage to its image. Because this can no longer be called a reputation, and nothing will fix it anymore. On the international stage, the German political elites are represented by those who are proud of their Nazi ancestors, such as Annalena Baerbock, who is now sitting in the chair of the President of the UN General Assembly. Because we judge by actions. That is why we speak this way. That's another example. And this is not an accident. This is a regularity. After all, the same German authorities, the same political elites of Germany, have for many years turned away from an obvious problem. This is not a problem, it is their tragedy. It's not our problem and not our concern. It is their problem and their tragedy. It's the non-payment of compensation to the victims of the blockade of Leningrad. They decided to make these payments only on a national basis, dividing the victims of their own dehumanization into those who are entitled and those who are not. This is all the same handwriting, testifying to the fact that, unfortunately, the ideology of the Third Reich has not remained in the past. It is all the same thing that is confirmed by their previous decisions, for example, the decision not to recognize the genocide of the Soviet people. Our grandfathers and fathers liberated Auschwitz and defeated Nazism in Europe. For us, the sacrilegious desecration of the memory of the victims of fascism is absolutely unacceptable, as is Europe's tolerance toward the revival of Nazi ideology on its territory. We call on all those who remain faithful to the decisions of the Nuremberg Tribunal to remember the bloody crimes of the Nazis and their accomplices and not to allow the humiliation of the memory of the fallen.